The city was alive with its usual hum, the rhythmic pulse of morning traffic filling the air. Elon Musk, in the driver's seat of his sleek electric car, found himself caught in the daily grind of the streets. He gazed out through the windshield, the world moving steadily around him, the sun's rays glinting off the polished cars, people walking briskly on the sidewalks, and the faint echo of distant honks blending with the urban soundtrack. The soft whir of his car's electric engine was a stark contrast to the roaring combustion engines around him. It was the quiet kind of day, calm and uneventful. Elon had no particular destination in mind, merely a brief pause in his usual high-stakes life. For a moment, he could almost feel at peace, removed from the chaos that often defined his existence as a CEO inventor and public figure. But then it happened. A sudden, high-pitched screech of tires shattered the air, slicing through the normal buzz of the city like a jagged knife. It was the unmistakable sound of a vehicle losing control. Elon's head snapped to the left, his eyes catching the blur of a car swerving violently across lanes. In an instant, it smashed into a nearby streetlight pole, the force of the impact sending a shockwave through the street. The sickening crunch of metal against metal reverberated through the air. For a split second, everything froze. The world around him seemed to hold its breath, as if unsure how to react. But as the crash settled, the chaos erupted. Elon's heart raced as the scene before him became clearer. Smoke billowed from the wrecked vehicle, and the sharp scent of burnt rubber filled the air. People screamed in shock, some running toward the wreck while others fumbled for their phones to capture the moment. There were no sirens yet, no sign of emergency responders, just the raw, unfiltered panic of a city caught off guard. Through the haze, Elon saw a man inside the wrecked car, his body twisted unnaturally, blood trickling from his forehead. The victim's pained cries pierced the air, a sound of desperation that cut deep into Elon's thoughts. The trapped man struggled to free himself, his attempts futile as the wreckage held him in place. Elon's mind snapped into focus. His surroundings seemed to slow down, as if time itself had paused, but the urgency of the situation was as real as the throbbing in his chest. He was closer than anyone else on the street. He could hear the distant sound of sirens in the background, but it felt too far away, too slow. The victim's cries for help rang out, echoing through the noise of the onlookers. Without thinking, Elon slammed his foot on the brake, bringing his car to a sudden halt. He looked at the chaos unfolding before him, and his thoughts were clear. I need to act now. I'm the closest person here. I am that instant. Everything else is busy schedule. The world's expectations of him faded into the background. This was no longer just an ordinary day. It was a moment where someone needed him, and he was the one closest to making a difference. But the question lingered in his mind as he unbuckled his seatbelt and rushed toward the wreckage. Can I make it in time? Elon's heart raced as his feet hit the pavement. His mind scrambled, assessing the situation, calculating the risks, and weighing his options. In that brief moment, his world narrowed down to a singular focus, the trapped victim in the wrecked car, screaming for help. For a split second, the tech mogul paused, his sharp mind going through rapid calculations. Should I call emergency services first? It was the logical thing to do, wasn't it? Every moment counted, but the sirens were still distant, the chaos of the street overwhelming the urgency. Would waiting be the best option? But, in his gut, he knew that waiting for others wasn't enough. What if they didn't make it in time? The decision was clear, but it wasn't an easy one. Elon had faced many challenges in his career, from the difficulties of launching rockets to the intricacies of creating self-driving cars. But this was different. This wasn't about technology or strategy, it was about a human life. He could feel the weight of that responsibility pressing on him as he quickly assessed the situation. I'm the closest one here, he thought as he glanced at the wrecked car, its twisted frame a stark reminder of the victim's peril. The driver's cries were getting weaker, more desperate. Every second mattered. His mind raced through his years of experience in the world of cutting-edge technology, from the Tesla electric cars to the innovations of SpaceX. He knew how to solve problems, how to think under pressure, but this wasn't the clean, calculated world of innovation. This was raw reality. Without another moment's hesitation, Elon made the decision to act. He slammed the door of his car shut with a force that seemed to resonate through the street, his steps purposeful as he made his way toward the wreckage. The faint echo of the distant sirens still lingered in the background, but it didn't matter now. I have to get there first. His hands moved with precision, his fingers quickly pulling out his phone to send a quick alert to emergency services. His Tesla's autopilot had already detected the accident and was doing its part to relay the information to authorities, but he needed to be there on the ground. It wasn't about waiting for others to save the day. I have to save this person now. He approached the car, the sight of the victim's mangled body bringing a surge of urgency. The driver's face was pale, blood streaking down from a deep gash on his forehead. The man's hands were trapped beneath the wreckage, his body pinned at an awkward angle. The victim's breaths were shallow, labored, each one a reminder of the narrow window Elon had to act. Stay calm, Elon told himself, his pulse quickening as his mind shifted gears. There was no room for hesitation, no room for error. He had to rely on his quick thinking. His eyes scanned the scene with a surgeon's precision, quickly noting what needed to be done. Elon's mind briefly flashed to his work with Tesla and SpaceX, how he had learned to problem-solve quickly, to trust his instincts and the technology around him. But this wasn't about rockets or self-driving cars. This was about saving a life in the here and now. He bent down and assessed the situation further. The victim was still conscious, but fading. His eyes met Elon's with a silent plea, and that was all the confirmation Elon needed. I need to help him. Despite the chaos around him, Elon moved with calm authority. He directed the few bystanders who had gathered around to help, instructing them on what little they could do to assist without making the situation worse. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. His mind was already calculating what he needed to do next. His heart beat louder with every passing second, but the deeper he waded into this decision, the clearer it became. Technology and quick thinking could make all the difference. Elon had spent his life thinking differently, but now it was about thinking in real time. As Elon moved closer, the victim's breath hitched and he weakly looked up. There was a brief moment of silence, where all that could be heard was the distant wail of the ambulance sirens, growing closer but not fast enough. And then the victim whispered, his voice weak and strained, "Help me." The moment was frozen. Everything, the people, the city, even Elon's thoughts paused in that heartbeat of desperation. What comes next? The next move could be the difference between life and death. Elon's eyes flicked over the scene with the kind of precision that came from years of solving complex problems. The victim was still conscious, but barely. His face was ashen, the blood from his forehead wound streaking down his face in grotesque rivulets, staining his clothes. His chest rose and fell with shallow, labored breaths, each exhale more ragged than the last. The sound of the sirens was louder now, but not nearly loud enough to calm the mounting urgency in Elon's chest. Time is running out, Elon thought as his heart raced. He quickly assessed the wrecked vehicle. The car was badly mangled, and the victim's legs were pinned beneath the crumpled metal. There was no easy way to extract him without causing further injury. How much time do I have? victim groaned, his body trembling, and Elon instinctively knelt down beside him, trying to calm the man with steady words. "You're going to be okay. Help is on the way," Elon said, though even he wasn't sure how much the victim could hear through the haze of pain. Elon's mind raced through potential solutions. The bleeding was severe, and the man was trapped in an awkward position, unable to free himself. Stop panicking. Focus on the basics first. He needed to stop the bleeding and stabilize the victim as much as possible until the paramedics arrived. He quickly tore a strip from the victim's shirt and pressed it to the bleeding wound on his forehead. This should buy us some time, Elon thought, but the pressure he applied did little to slow the blood. The victim's breathing was getting worse, his gasps shallow and frantic. Elon glanced at his watch. A few seconds felt like an eternity as he watched the seconds tick away. The victim's condition was deteriorating, faster than he anticipated. Why isn't help here yet? Elon thought, glancing nervously down the street for signs of the ambulance. He didn't wait long to make his next move. His Tesla, still parked nearby, was equipped with advanced technology that Elon knew could assist in situations like these. The car's AI system, designed for everything from autonomous driving to emergency alerts, was already working in the background. As he reached for his phone to call for backup, his Tesla's screen lit up with a notification. Emergency services located. Ambulance ET, 7 minutes. 7 minutes? It felt like an eternity. Elon's mind raced. He could already hear the ambulance in the distance, but it wasn't close enough. The seconds were ticking away like a countdown to disaster. I can't wait for the ambulance to arrive, Elon thought. I have to do something now. His brain shifted gears into problem-solving mode, drawing on everything from his engineering expertise to his experience with Tesla's safety systems. He knew that technology, when used correctly, could make a difference in life or death situations. Okay, he muttered under his breath, his fingers working with practiced precision. Let's think this through. The car's AI system had already analyzed the scene and suggested a path for quick rescue first. Disable the car's electrical system to ensure no risk of fire from the battery pack. Elon activated the system from his phone, disabling the power in the Tesla. Next, he instructed the car's AI to send a location update directly to emergency services, making sure they knew the exact position of the accident.ass he worked. He noticed the victim's pulse was weakening, his skin clammy and cold to the touch. Every moment felt like a battle against time. Why isn't this faster? Elon thought in frustration. He was used to solving problems with speed and precision, but the stakes here were higher than any technical challenge he had faced. The victim's life was on the line, and there was only so much technology could do in the heat of the moment. There was no time for further analysis or waiting for help. Elon had to act now, and he knew it. First aid, quick and efficient. Let's do this. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small first aid kit he always carried with him. His hands trembled slightly as he grabbed the gauze and medical tape, trying to keep his composure. He applied pressure to the wound on the victim's forehead and wrapped the gauze tightly to slow the bleeding. At the same time, he monitored the victim's pulse, pressing his fingers against the man's wrist. Pulse was still there, but it was weak, slow, like a faint heartbeat struggling to survive. Elon's own pulse quickened as he mentally counted the seconds. Stay with me, he silently urged the man, his thoughts momentarily drifting to the same technology that had brought him here, the same technology that could save this man's life. His innovations in AI and autonomous driving had always been about improving lives, but now, in this moment, Elon understood how fragile that life could be, how quickly things could change. This wasn't about electric cars or rockets anymore. It was about human survival. The tension in the air was thick, like a taut wire ready to snap. Elon's hand hovered over the victim's chest, ready to perform chest compressions if necessary, but the victim's condition was so unstable that any wrong move could make it worse. Would he make it in time? Would his quick thinking be enough? The seconds stretched, each one heavy with the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Suddenly, the faint sound of an approaching siren pierced the tension. But still, Elon hesitated, his hand lingering just above the man's chest, waiting for the right moment. Elon stood over the victim, his mind racing as he quickly surveyed the situation. The minutes that had felt like hours were beginning to wear on him, but he didn't allow himself to show any signs of fatigue. His focus was unwavering, locked on the injured man who was still fighting for his life. Despite the chaos around him, Elon had a sense of clarity in the midst of the storm. The bystanders, though well-meaning, were frozen by indecision and fear. They didn't know what to do, and that's where Elon stepped in. His voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the confusion. "You, with the blue shirt, help me hold this pressure on his wound. You, get me some cloth, anything, to help stop the bleeding." His commands were precise, and without hesitation, the crowd began to move. People rushed to gather the necessary materials, listening to his every word as if he were the calm center of the hurricane. Elon didn't have time to waste. Every second counted. He worked alongside the bystanders, guiding them with the precision of someone who had orchestrated thousands of projects, big and small. His hands, steady and sure, continued to apply pressure to the wound on the victim's head. He could feel the faint pulse of the man's heart, but it was too weak, too irregular. The clock was still ticking. Then, as if from nowhere, a realization hit Elon. Neuralink. SpaceX. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through him. In that moment, his understanding of engineering and human anatomy collided in a way that gave him hope. He'd studied the human brain's neural pathways and understood how vital blood flow to the brain was. He knew that applying pressure to the carotid artery could help redirect blood to the brain, preventing further brain damage until the victim could get the proper medical care. "All right," Elon murmured to himself, his voice low but resolute. He gently adjusted the man's head, tilting it at an angle that allowed him to apply pressure to the right spot on the neck. His fingers pressed against the artery, trying to stop the flow of blood just enough to slow the damage to the brain. Stay with me," he thought, his pulse syncing with the victim's slowing heartbeat. For a moment, nothing happened. The world around Elon felt as if it had slowed down. The background noise, the distant hum of the city, the sound of sirens, was drowned out by the overwhelming focus on the man lying before him. Elon didn't speak. He didn't need to. His mind was in full survival mode, piecing together everything he knew about science and technology to make a difference here, now. Then, something shifted. The victim's chest rose and fell a bit more evenly. The shallow breathing, which had previously been strained and ragged, now seemed less panicked. Elon's fingers remained pressed against the artery, and slowly, cautiously, the pulse in the victim's wrist began to steady. The victim's eyelids fluttered, and then, with great effort, he opened his eyes. His gaze locked on Elon, who had not moved an inch, still focused on his task.
The man's lips parted as he tried to speak, his voice hoarse and weak.
"Thank you," Elon's heart softened, but only for a split second. There was no time for celebration, no time to soak in the gratitude. The victim was still in danger, still vulnerable. But this moment, this small victory, was all he needed to know he had done something right. He remained at the man's side, offering a soft smile that said everything. "You're going to be okay." And although he didn't expect it, The words felt comforting even to Elon himself. The bystanders, who had been watching in awe, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. There was a collective sense of relief in the air. The victim was still in danger, but thanks to Elon's quick thinking and leadership, he was no longer teetering on the edge of death. Elon didn't linger on the moment, though. His mind already shifted to the next task at hand, getting the victim into the hands of medical professionals. But the grateful expression on the man's face stayed with him for a moment longer. This is why I do what I do, Elon thought. It wasn't about the fame, the money, or the recognition. It was about making a real difference, about changing lives when it mattered most. The sound of the ambulance grew louder, closer now, its flashing lights reflecting in the chaos around them. Elon stood up, his hands still slightly trembling from the adrenaline, but his mind focused and clear. He motioned to the bystanders. The ambulance is almost here. Let's make sure he's as stable as possible for the paramedics. As the first responders arrived, they took over the situation, moving with practiced precision. The victim was quickly loaded into the ambulance, still conscious, still alive, something that had seemed impossible only moments ago. Elon took a step back, quietly watching the scene unfold. No one recognized him. No one called out his name. He was just another face in the crowd, a figure who had stepped in when no one else could. And that's how he wanted it.aas. The ambulance sped away, leaving behind the lingering echoes of its sirens. Elon stood there for a moment longer, his eyes on the horizon. He didn't need applause. He didn't need a medal. In this moment, knowing he had made a difference was all the reward he needed. ASA. The sirens of the ambulance faded into the distance. Elon quietly slipped back into his car. The chaos of the accident scene was slowly being replaced by the organized flurry of emergency responders taking control. The bystanders, still in shock, were murmuring amongst themselves, exchanging looks of disbelief. A young woman, standing off to the side, had pulled out her phone and captured the final moments of Elon's efforts, his calm, steady hand on the victim's neck, his leadership guiding the bystanders. It was the kind of footage that would soon flood social media. Elon drove away in silence, the hum of his Tesla's electric engine, the only sound accompanying him. He wasn't looking for recognition. In fact, he preferred the anonymity. The world could carry on without knowing who had stepped in to help. He didn't need accolades, awards, or media coverage. He had done what he had to do. The next morning, however, the story was everywhere. News outlets from around the globe were calling Elon a hero. His quick thinking, his calm under pressure, everything about the moment had captivated the public's imagination. Headlines praised his actions, and the footage of him saving the victim went viral.